In a world where power shouts and truth is silenced, one man's calm defiance shook the media to its core. On live television, Ibrahim Traoré faced relentless interruptions, 18 times in less than an hour. Yet his patience became the very weapon that ended a career built on noise. Tonight, you'll witness the moment that stunned the world, the confrontation that turned silence into strength, and the story that left a legacy far beyond the studio walls. If you believe voices that rise above arrogance deserve to be heard, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more powerful stories that the world must not forget. The studio was colder than it looked on camera. White light bled down from the ceiling, bleaching every wrinkle, every flicker of expression. 1,000 silent eyes, the cameras, the producers, the audience at home, were watching. Somewhere in that silence, a storm was waiting. Mark Levin leaned forward in his chair, voice sharp as a blade. He was the veteran of these stages, the master of interruption. His reputation was carved from dominance, never letting an opponent finish, never allowing silence to reveal truths he could not control. He had silenced governors, lawyers, generals. To him, this night was no different. And yet opposite him sat a man unlike any he had faced before. Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier turned leader, carrying the weight of a continent's forgotten history on his shoulders. His presence was quiet, but it filled the room more than Levin's fury ever could. Where Levin's words lashed like fire, Traoré sat still as stone, a living contradiction to the chaos hurled at him. The first interruption came within seconds. Levin cut in, slicing through Traoré's introduction like an executioner's blade. The second followed, before the audience could blink. Then a third, each one harsher, louder, designed to suffocate. The control room flickered with nervous glances. But Levin pressed on. By the 5th interruption, the rhythm had become ritual. By the 10th, the cameras caught the unease in the viewer's eyes. By the 15th, the air itself felt heavy with something unspeakable. Still, Traoré did not break. His voice, when he managed a fragment, was low, deliberate. Each unfinished sentence left a trail of silence deeper than Levin's noise. The contrast was unbearable, a duel not of equals but of opposites. And then came the 18th interruption. Levin's face flushed, his hand slammed the desk, his words a torrent designed to drown everything else. The studio lights flickered. The microphones hissed. For a moment it was unclear if the storm was natural or human. The audience leaned forward. Millions at home held their breath. Would the soldier finally break? Would the calm fracture under the weight of rage? But Traoré did not move. He waited, his silence more deafening than Levin's shouts. A pause stretched into eternity. Then, at last, he raised his head, his eyes steady, his expression unshaken, and the narration whispered the question that gripped the world. 18 times he was silenced. 18 times he was denied his voice. Yet what he did next shocked the world. The silence after the 18th interruption was heavier than the words that had filled the air. But to understand the weight of that silence, one had to look back, far beyond the walls of the studio, into the long shadows that followed Ibrahim Traoré wherever he went. He had not come to this stage by chance. His journey to that chair was carved by hunger, betrayal, and a calling that refused to let him rest. From the dust and heat of West Africa to the glaring lights of a Western studio, every step carried echoes of his past, and every breath seemed to disturb ghosts who still demanded justice. As a young soldier, he had lived in barracks where the walls sweated despair, where men traded loyalty for bread, and where the weight of foreign powers pressed down harder than the sun. He knew what it meant to obey orders that went against the soul. He knew the silence of the fields where farmers reaped nothing but debt. And he knew the whispers of children crying from hunger in the night. Those memories followed him like scars hidden beneath his calm. Thomas Sankara's ghost lingered too. Not in the literal sense, but in the way the people spoke his name, their eyes shining with both admiration and regret. Sankara had dreamed of an Africa unchained, but that dream was crushed beneath bullets and betrayal. For Traoré, that legacy was both a crown and a curse. He could not walk a street without feeling it. He could not lift a hand without carrying it. And as he sat before Levin, that legacy sat beside him, invisible but unyielding. Levin, meanwhile, lived in another world. His was a kingdom built of microphones and screens, a fortress of voices carefully arranged to keep power unchallenged. To him, debate was war, and his weapon was interruption. His reputation was sharpened through years of cutting down guests before they could form their arguments. His audience adored the spectacle, mistaking aggression for strength. And tonight, he had chosen Traoré as his target, believing that silencing him would prove his dominance once more. But there was more to this confrontation than the surface. The producers had not booked Traoré for ratings alone. Behind closed doors, whispers spoke of pressure, sponsors who feared the rise of a voice that could inspire millions beyond borders, shadowy figures who preferred Africa silent, compliant, and invisible. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted Traoré ridiculed, cut down, made into a caricature before he could become a symbol. The studio lights carried that tension. Every flicker seemed intentional, every pause in the feed a threat. Behind the cameras, assistants scribbled notes, producers barked into earpieces, and somewhere, unseen, a man in a dark suit watched without blinking. The stage was more than a television set. It was a battlefield, polished and disguised. As the interruptions piled on, the weight of the trap became clearer. Traoré was not simply being interviewed. He was being cornered, tested, measured. Each time Levin cut him off, it was as if invisible chains were tightening around him. The viewers at home saw hostility. Traoré felt something deeper, a machine grinding against him, demanding that he break, and yet he did not. His stillness was not weakness. It was defiance, forged through years of watching storms pass. The man who had walked through hunger could not be shaken by noise. The soldier who had buried brothers in unmarked graves could not be unsettled by insults. Where others saw passivity, he carried a weapon stronger than Levin's voice: composure. The audience watching at home began to sense it. At first they whispered complaints about Levin's rudeness, but as the interruptions grew, something shifted. They began to notice the rhythm, the imbalance, the way one man shouted while the other endured. Social media feeds lit up with messages. Why won't he let him speak? Why is he afraid of silence? Look at Traoré's face. Why is he so calm? In living rooms, bars, and cafes, strangers debated what they were seeing. Was it arrogance or was it fear? And why did it feel as if the man being silenced was in control, while the man shouting seemed desperate? Inside the studio, Levin pressed harder, unaware of the shift outside. He mistook the silence as submission, the patience as weakness. His words grew sharper, his tone more desperate, his body leaning so far across the table that the cameras could barely keep him framed. His performance was not the dominance he imagined. It was the unraveling of a man who feared losing control, and through it all, Traoré sat unmoved. His eyes did not flinch. His breathing did not quicken. His hands rested on the desk as if carved from stone. It was as though he had already seen this moment, as though history itself had prepared him for it. Somewhere deep inside, he remembered the faces of his people. Mothers who sold the last of their belongings to feed their children. Fathers who left home with empty pockets and returned with nothing but shame. Villages where the soil gave nothing back, yet the people endured. He carried them all into that studio, and their resilience whispered through him. The world did not yet understand what was unfolding. They saw a man being interrupted over and over. They did not yet know that this silence, this endurance, was not defeat. It was preparation, and as Levin's interruptions reached their crescendo, the stage began to tremble with a question that no one dared ask aloud. Was this interview truly about words, or was it about the collapse of a system that could no longer contain the truth? The interruptions became their own rhythm, a hammer striking against silence. 1, 2, 3 until the count no longer mattered. Each cut was faster, louder, more desperate, like a man clawing at a door that refused to open. Levin's words rushed like a flood, crashing over every attempt at response. He was not debating. He was drowning. And yet he did not see it. The audience did. The cameras captured everything. The sweat collecting on Levin's forehead, the reddening of his face, the tremor in his voice that revealed something deeper than confidence. Fear. It was the fear of losing control, the fear that silence would expose him. Traoré remained still. Not frozen, not passive, still, like the earth under a storm. His eyes did not chase Levin's movements. They held a steady line, as though staring through the man into something unseen behind him. Every interruption made his calm more unbearable. Viewers leaned closer to their screens, not for Levin's fire, but for Traoré's silence, waiting to see if he would finally shatter. Behind the glass wall of the control room, unease rippled. Producers shifted in their seats. The director, fingers on the switchboard, muttered to an assistant. One of the technicians, pale and nervous, whispered that the feed was trending in real time, millions flooding social platforms with questions, ridicule, outrage. The show was supposed to humiliate Traoré, to make him look small, irrelevant. Instead, the storm was turning on Levin. Somewhere in the back, a man in a tailored suit leaned against the wall, arms folded. He had no badge, no headset, no obvious role in the studio, yet no one dared ask who he was. His eyes never left Traoré. He did not smile, did not frown. He simply watched, as though measuring a calculation only he understood. Levin grew harsher. He waved his papers, slammed his palm on the desk, spoke over every fragment of a word Traoré offered. At one point he rose half from his seat, pointing an accusing finger across the table. To him, dominance was measured in volume and silence was defeat. But to the millions watching, the imbalance became unbearable. Each time Levin interrupted, the world noticed the calm on the other side, and with each passing second, they began to wonder, who truly held the power here? Whispers surfaced on social media, then spiraled into theories. Why was Levin so determined to silence him? Why had the producers let it continue without intervention? Rumors ignited. That Traoré had come prepared to reveal something, a truth hidden, a document, a name. The more he was silenced, the louder the mystery grew, and then the studio itself betrayed the tension. The lights flickered, briefly plunging the room into half-shadow before stabilizing again. A hum of static crawled across the microphones. For a heartbeat, Levin's words were muffled, distorted. The interruption broke his rhythm, and in that instant, the audience saw it, the crack in his armor. He recovered quickly, forcing his voice higher, sharper, but the crack remained. Traoré's eyes lifted slightly, catching the flicker of the lights as though acknowledging something the others did not. His expression did not change, yet the silence around him thickened. The 18th interruption loomed. By now the audience counted them unconsciously. Each time Levin lunged across his words, the number rose like a drum beat toward an inevitable end. 17 had already passed. The 18th was near. But before it arrived, something strange unfolded. A producer in the control room leaned toward the director, whispering urgently. The director's eyes widened, his hand hovering above the switchboard. He glanced toward the man in the suit, waiting for instruction. None came. The man's face remained carved in stone, his silence an order in itself. Levin, oblivious, pressed forward. His voice was a weapon unsheathed, his face flushed with the intoxication of his own fury. He believed he was winning, yet the cameras, the audience, the world outside saw something else entirely. The unraveling of a man shouting at a wall that would not move. Traoré's hands, still folded on the desk, shifted slightly. Not clenched, not raised, just a subtle motion, like the adjustment of a soldier before a decisive strike. It was nothing, yet it was everything. The audience saw it. The producers saw it. Even Levin felt it, though he could not name what stirred in him. The 18th interruption struck like thunder. Levin leaned across the table, his words cascading, spitting, desperate. The microphones hissed, the lights flickered once more, and the tension in the room reached its breaking point. And still, Traoré did not respond. He waited. His silence stretched into something unbearable, as if the entire studio were holding its breath. The world outside had already chosen its side. Across continents, viewers wrote not about Levin's dominance, but about his fear. Memes spread, hashtags erupted, news anchors paused their own broadcasts to replay clips of the silence, the calm, the eyes of a man who refused to be broken. And then the whisper began. It was not spoken, not audible, but it carried like wind through a forest. What will he do next? Somewhere in the shadows, the man in the suit finally moved. He adjusted his cuff, checked his watch, and for the first time, allowed the faintest trace of a smile. The stage was set. The storm had reached its peak, and the silence before the 19th moment was heavier than anything words could carry. The 18th interruption ended not with words, but with exhaustion. Levin's voice, sharpened from years of practice, now trembled at its edges. His throat burned from shouting, his papers lay scattered like defeated soldiers on the desk, and his eyes darted toward the cameras with a desperation he could not hide. He had interrupted so many times that the word debate no longer applied. This was something else. A man clawing at the air, trying to suffocate truth before it could breathe. The studio, however, no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the silence. Every viewer, every technician, every hidden figure behind the glass was now waiting, leaning forward. Not for Levin's voice, but for the moment when Ibrahim Traoré would finally speak. The stillness had become unbearable, a pressure so heavy that even the cameras seemed to hum under its weight. The interruptions had carved out a void, and the world hungered to hear how Traoré would fill it. He lifted his head slowly, the motion deliberate, unhurried. His eyes, calm as stone, locked onto Levin. The shouting man leaned forward, ready to strike again, but something in that gaze halted him. For the first time, Levin's words faltered before they left his lips, and then Traoré spoke. The voice was low, measured, not loud enough to dominate but powerful enough to command. Each syllable landed like iron dropped into water, rippling outward, impossible to ignore. He did not rush. He did not defend. He simply began to speak, and the silence in the room bent to him. "You have interrupted me 18 times, he said, the narration heavy with restraint. But every time you cut me off, you did not silence me. You silenced the people I represent. You silenced their hunger, their grief, their hope." Levin tried to interject, his mouth opening on instinct, but nothing came. The producers in the control room froze. Even the man in the suit lowered his arms, suddenly attentive. Traoré continued, his words unraveling like a truth too long buried. "You sit here with your papers and your lights, believing you control the story. But you cannot control what you do not understand. You cannot shout over a storm that has already begun. I do not need to raise my voice because what I speak is not mine alone. It belongs to millions, and millions cannot be interrupted." The words pierced deeper than any argument Levin had ever faced. His show, his reputation, his carefully built empire thrived on noise, on overwhelming the weak. But this was different. The silence that followed each of Traoré's sentences was not emptiness. It was thunder waiting to break. Traoré reached to the desk before him. The camera zoomed instinctively, catching the glint of a folded document. For days, rumors had circled that he carried something. Evidence, revelation, truth. And now, he slid it across the desk toward Levin. Not with force, not with drama, but with quiet inevitability. "This," Traoré said, his tone steady, "is what you fear. Not me, not my words, but the truth that no interruption can erase." Levin's hand hovered, trembling. His eyes flicked toward the control room, toward the man in the suit, toward the cameras. He did not touch the paper. He could not. The silence stretched again, wrapping around him like a noose. The man in the suit straightened, his expression unreadable. The producers whispered frantically, some urging to cut the feed, others insisting to let it run. The director hesitated, his finger above the switch. But outside, millions of viewers were already screen recording, already sharing, already ensuring that no matter what the network decided, the moment was immortal. Traoré leaned back, his face calm, his voice unwavering. "You interrupted me 18 times. But I only needed once," the words shattered the studio. Not in noise, but in silence. Levin, for the first time in his career, had no reply. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but nothing came. His empire of interruption crumbled in a single instant of composure. The audience at home erupted. Laughter, shock, celebration, disbelief. Social platforms crashed under the weight of clips spreading faster than the network could contain. Headlines began writing themselves. The silence that ended Levin. Traoré's calm response shakes the world. 18 interruptions. One answer. In the studio, the lights flickered one last time. Some swore later it was coincidence. Others claimed it was deliberate, a signal. But to those who witnessed it, the flicker felt symbolic. The last gasp of a machine that had lost control. Levin sat frozen, his hands shaking, his face drained of color. The man in the suit turned and walked out, his silence an acknowledgement of defeat. The producers buried their faces in their hands, realizing what had just been broadcast, and Ibrahim Traoré, unmoved, remained seated. He did not gloat, did not smile. His role was not to humiliate a man, but to expose a system built on noise and control. With calm alone, he had ended it. The silence after his final words was not empty. It was victory. When the cameras cut, the silence did not end. It lingered like smoke after a fire, drifting into every corner of the studio. Crew members avoided one another's eyes, shuffling papers, unplugging headsets, pretending not to feel the weight of what had just unfolded. Levin sat slumped, his shoulders heavy, his face pale. His lips moved, searching for words, but none came. The man who had silenced others for decades was now crushed beneath the silence of his own undoing. Ibrahim Traoré rose from his seat with a calmness that unnerved everyone around him. No security rushed in, no producer dared approach. He adjusted his jacket, gathered the paper he had placed before Levin, untouched, and tucked it back into his hand. It was not meant for Levin anymore. It was meant for the world. He walked out of the studio without fanfare. The cameras no longer followed, yet every step echoed louder than any broadcast. Staff whispered in the hallways, eyes darting from him to the ground, as though they feared what might happen if they looked too long into the stillness that surrounded him. Outside, the night had changed. Screens across the globe pulsed with his face, his voice, his silence. Clips replayed endlessly, dissected frame by frame. Analysts tried to explain it. Commentators scrambled to spin it, but no one could escape the truth. A single composed response had ended a career built on interruption. Levin's empire collapsed in real time. Sponsors withdrew within hours, citing unexpected controversy. Networks distanced themselves, their statements cold and calculated. His followers, once loyal, fractured into confusion. Some defended him, others mocked him, but all of them knew something irreversible had happened. The man who never lost control had been undone by the one opponent he could not dominate, silence itself. And yet, the story was not about Levin. Not anymore. It was about what people saw in Traoré. Across Africa, watch parties erupted into cheers. In Ouagadougou, the capital he called home, crowds gathered in the streets, watching replay after replay on battered televisions and glowing phone screens. Mothers who had lost faith in politics wiped tears from their eyes. Students whispered to each other, "He showed them we are not small. He showed them we cannot be silenced." In Europe, in America, in cities where Africa's voice had always been dismissed as background noise, people felt the shift. Commentators admitted begrudgingly that something extraordinary had happened. Traoré had not shouted, had not raged, had not stormed. He had endured, and in that endurance, he had won. The document he carried became legend overnight. What truth did it hold? Some claimed it exposed backroom deals between media figures and political forces. Others insisted it revealed corruption buried deep in financial institutions. No one could confirm, for Traoré had not revealed it. He had only shown that it existed. And in withholding, he gave the mystery more power than any revelation could. The man in the suit, whose presence in the studio remained unexplained, vanished into silence. No records showed who he was. No staff admitted to inviting him. Yet his image, caught in a blurry reflection on a studio window, spread online with feverish speculation. Conspiracy theories bloomed. Was he a handler, a sponsor, an agent of a power fearful of what Traoré might say? The truth remained hidden, another layer of mystery that only deepened the story. But Traoré did not concern himself with the speculation. His path was not the internet's frenzy nor the media's noise. When he returned to his people, he returned quietly, without victory speeches or triumphant parades. He walked among them as he always had, a soldier in spirit if not in uniform. The calm that undid Levin was the same calm that steadied his nation. Still, the ripple could not be contained. Activists from Lagos to Dakar, from Nairobi to Johannesburg, invoked his name. Movements that had struggled for breath found renewed strength. They pointed to the moment, replayed endlessly, 18 interruptions, and then the calm that shattered a giant. This, they said, is proof. They can shout over us, they can cut us off, but they cannot erase us. Even in places far removed from Africa's struggles, the story resonated. In small towns where workers felt voiceless, in classrooms where students were told to stay quiet, in courtrooms where the weak were silenced by power, people saw themselves in that studio. They saw the patience, the dignity, the refusal to break, and they carried it with them. Levin retreated from the public eye. Days after the broadcast, he issued a statement, short, bitter, defiant. But no one listened. His voice, once amplified, now rang hollow. The silence Traoré had left him with became permanent. And Ibrahim Traoré, without lifting a fist, without raising his voice, without anything more than composure, became something larger than himself. He became the symbol of resistance to noise, to arrogance, to the machinery of interruption. He had shown the world that calm was not weakness but power. The story closed not in the studio, but in the eyes of a child watching from afar. A boy in a village with little more than dust and dreams, sitting before a flickering television, powered by a generator. He stared at the replay, the shouting man, the calm man, the silence that followed. His small voice whispered the words he would never forget. We are not small. And so the narration left a question, echoing across continents, burning in the hearts of all who watched. In a world where power shouts and truth whispers, is it possible that silence itself is the loudest weapon of all?